In the previous video, we talked about using Google Gemini on the Gemini website, but honestly, that only unlocked less than half of what Gemini can do. So in this video, we're going to dive into Google AI Studio and show you how to tap into even more features of Gemini. Gemini on Google AI Studio is way more powerful, and on top of that, other Google AI models and services are also integrated into this platform. Let's start with a quick overview of what Google AI Studio can do. First, you can enter a prompt for chat, just like on the Gemini website. But here, you get more control by adjusting model settings and system instructions to fine-tune how Gemini responds. Second, there's streaming in real time. You can have voice, video, and even screen-sharing conversations, kind of like using Gemini Live on your phone. But again, the cool part is you can customize the model behavior here too. Third, we have Generate Media. This includes image, speech, and video generation. Behind the scenes, it's using Google's Imagen for image generation and Veo for video. And finally, there's Build Apps. This lets you create full-on applications, and the best part is you can seamlessly connect all the Gemini and Google models mentioned earlier. Preview your app instantly and deploy it with a single click. Even if you have zero coding experience, you can still build something really powerful. Actually, Google AI Studio is designed as a developer-focused platform. It's meant for things like customizing model parameters, building apps, and deploying them. But the thing is, a lot of its advanced features can be super useful for regular users too. Once you learn how to use them, you'll be able to get way more out of Gemini. In fact, some people even feel that the responses you get from Gemini in AI Studio are higher quality. Plus, the latest models, like Gemini 2.5 Pro, are free to use in AI Studio, with no credit limits. New features also tend to roll out on AI Studio first, so it's definitely worth learning how to use Gemini there. Alright, let's start by looking at the chat prompt feature. Just go to aistudio.google.com and you'll land right here. At first glance, the interface might look a little overwhelming, so let me quickly walk you through it. In the center, you've got the main chat box where you can type your prompt, just like how you'd use any other LLM chatbot, like the Gemini web version or ChatGPT. On the right side, there's a panel called Run Settings. This is where you can choose which model you want to use and fine-tune other parameters to get more precise control over the output. Then, up in the top right corner of the chat box, there's a row of actions. These include some handy tools that I'll walk you through in just a bit. Alright, let's start a conversation with Gemini. We'll begin with a simple question. For example, what are the benefits of meditation for the body and mind? Next, choose a model. I recommend going with the latest Gemini 2.5 series. You'll see a few options here: Pro, Flash, and Flash Lite. You can also view details about each model, like their use cases, response speed, and even API pricing. But don't worry, just using them inside AI Studio is completely free. You only get charged if you're a developer connecting the Gemini model to your own app via API. So as a regular user, all you need to care about is which model fits your use case. To keep it simple, if your task involves complex reasoning, math, or coding, go with Pro. For everything else, I usually pick Flash. Since this question about meditation is pretty straightforward, I'll go with the Flash model. Now I've got a nicely formatted bullet point answer, and each point comes with a source link. That's because in the Run settings on the right, I've enabled Google Search. This means Gemini isn't just relying on its training data, it's also pulling fresh info from Google, which helps reduce hallucinated answers. In the top right corner of the response box, there's a rerun button. If you're not happy with the answer, just click that to regenerate a new one. Now, I'm going to turn off Google Search and rerun the same prompt to show you the difference. As expected, this time the answer doesn't include any source citations. Unlike the Gemini web version, Google AI Studio here doesn't automatically save your chat history by default. So if you want to keep a record of your current conversation, make sure to click Save Prompt. Later on, you can find it under the History tab in the menu on the left. If you don't want to manually save every time, you can go up to the Settings menu in the top right corner and turn on Autosave. That way, your chats will be saved automatically. Personally, I like to manually save only the important conversations. Aside from simple Q&A, you can also use Gemini Chat for all kinds of content creation. Things like marketing copy, blog posts, story ideas, professional reports, business emails. For example, let's say I run a burger shop and we're launching a brand new burger. I want to generate a catchy piece of marketing copy to promote it. In this case, I'll make an extra adjustment in the run settings on the right, specifically the temperature setting. Temperature controls how creative and random the output is. A lower value, closer to 0, makes Gemini more conservative and predictable. A higher value, closer to 2, makes the output more diverse and creative. But it might also get a little off-topic or inconsistent. So if you're writing something that needs to be precise and professional, like a business email or technical report, it's better to dial the temperature down. For most use cases like blog posts or story writing, the default value of 1 gives a nice balance between accuracy and creativity. But in my example, since I need something fun and super creative for a marketing campaign, I'm going to turn the temperature up closer to 2. And here we go. The triple melt, pure indulgence. Not bad, right? Another powerful way to use Gemini is for processing long content, whether it's a big block of text, an audio file, or even a video. You can have it summarize everything so you can quickly understand or filter out the key info. For example, I upload a 33-page PDF titled Semiconductor Industry Report and asked Gemini to summarize it for me. In less than a minute, I got back a clean bullet point summary, super helpful for quickly getting the main takeaways from a long document. You can also insert a YouTube video URL directly. This is supported by default. For instance, I passed a link to one of my previous videos about Gemini and asked it to summarize the content. Let's take a look. Again, Gemini quickly broke it down into key points in bullet form. Perfect for learning and absorbing new information efficiently. And by the way, check out the token count displayed on the right. A token is basically the unit a language model uses to process text. Gemini supports up to 1 million tokens, which is roughly equivalent to 750,000 words of context it can remember and work with. Since Gemini is a multimodal model, it can handle not just text, but also images, audio, and video. Like here, a 20-minute video takes up about 360,000 tokens. Next, let's go over the remaining run settings on the right side that we haven't covered yet. Some of these are more technical and mainly intended for developers, so if it feels a bit too much, feel free to skip ahead to the next part. All right, we've already talked about model selection and temperature, so let's move on. First up is media resolution. This setting affects how Gemini processes uploaded images and videos. By default, it's set to high, which helps the model understand visual content more accurately. But if you're trying to reduce token usage, switching to low resolution can help. Next is thinking mode. This allows Gemini to do some internal reasoning before generating a response, making the output more accurate. If you're asking a complex question that requires reasoning, it's a good idea to turn this on. Of course, this kind of internal thinking does use more tokens. For regular users, that's no big deal. But if you're a developer, you might want to set a thinking budget to control how much gets used. By the way, the Gemini 2.5 Pro model has thinking mode enabled by default, and you can't turn it off. Scrolling further down, here is structured output. If you click Edit, then go to API documentation, you'll find a more detailed explanation with examples. One example they give is extracting data from resumes and formatting that into a structured database. Super useful if you're working with large amounts of text and need consistent output formats. Next is code execution. As the name suggests, this allows Gemini to generate and run Python code. This isn't just for solving complex math problems. Developers can also take advantage of it to use specific Python libraries for more advanced or customized tasks. Then we have function calling. This one also links to its own API documentation, and to put it simply, it lets you connect Gemini to external tools and APIs. Definitely more of a developer feature, so if you're curious, I recommend checking out this doc on your own. Grounding with Google Search. We've already covered earlier. It basically allows Gemini to search the web for up-to-date information that's not in its training data. URL context. This allows Gemini to fetch and read content directly from a URL you provide. It works a lot like uploading a file instead of a PDF or doc. You're giving it a web page to pull from. Next up, we have the Advanced Settings section. For safety settings, this is where you can adjust how strictly Gemini filters out harmful or sensitive content. On the Gemini website, these filters are locked in, and the model will avoid generating anything potentially harmful. But in Google AI Studio, users have the flexibility to customize the safety thresholds themselves. Next, we've got Add Stop Sequence and Output Length. These settings let you control how long Gemini's response will be. You can insert a stop sequence to cut off the output at a certain point, or set a max token limit for the response. These are more useful for developers who need precise control over model behavior. For everyday users, you can usually leave these alone. And finally, there's Top P. This works similarly to temperature. It's another way to adjust the randomness or creativity of the output. A value closer to 1 makes the answers more diverse and varied, while a value closer to 0 makes them more conservative. That said, if you're already tweaking temperature, you can usually just leave Top P at the default value. All right, now that we've covered the run settings on the right, let's look at the row of actions in the top right corner of the chat box. Some of these are actually really handy for everyday users. First up is System Instructions. This lets you set a role or define rules for Gemini to follow when responding. For example, let's say I want to turn a YouTube video into a blog post. I'll set Gemini's role as an expert content creator and tell it to write an SEO-friendly blog post. Then I paste in the YouTube link. Here's the output. And yep, it's neatly turned the video content into a blog-style article with proper paragraphs. Though you could type these rules directly into the chat box, there's a catch. Once you end that conversation, you'll have to retype them all over again next time. If you put the rules in System Instructions instead, they'll stay in place even if you clear chat and start a new session. Next, let's talk about Compare Mode. This feature lets developers set up 2 different models, System Instructions or Run settings side by side, so they can quickly compare Gemini's outputs on the same screen. It's super handy for testing parameters. Of course, regular users can take advantage of Compare Mode too. For example, if you're not sure which model to pick, you can put 2.5 Pro on the left and 2.5 Flash on the right, then simply choose the answer you like best. You can even give each side different instructions to generate different types of content in one go. Going back to our earlier example, on the left, I could have Gemini turn a YouTube video into a blog post, while on the right, I'd like to turn the same video into a social media post. That way, I get both done at the same time. Pretty awesome. And if you're a developer, once you've fine-tuned all your settings, you can click Get SDK Code. This will give you ready-to-use code for calling the Gemini model in your own application, complete with all your chosen settings like model type, temperature, system instructions, and other parameters. Lastly, over on the right, there's the prompt gallery. Here you'll find lots of example prompts you can explore. Great for discovering more ways to make Gemini useful. All right, that wraps up the chat prompt section. Let's move on to the second part. Stream Realtime. Here you can interact with Gemini in real time through text, voice, webcam, or screen sharing. The screen sharing feature is especially useful. Sometimes it's tricky to explain something to Gemini using just text, so sharing your screen makes things a lot easier. For example, if I'm working on an Excel sales data sheet and want to speed things up with a formula, but I'm not sure which one to use, I can simply share my screen and ask Gemini directly. I have 2 sheets, one called Sales Data with product IDs and another called Product List where the product names are stored. How can I use a formula to fill in the product names in my sales data sheet?
You can use the VLOOKUP function to do that. In the product name column in your sales data sheet, you can enter a formula like equals VLOOKUP and parentheses, C2, product underscore list, $A $B $6, 2, false.
Gemini gives me the formula, and I can just copy and paste it straight into Excel. The same formula works for unit price. And for total revenue, it's simply column D multiplied by column F. It's not just for Excel. If you run into problems with any professional software, you can try using the screen sharing feature. You can also think of screen sharing like talking to an online tutor or consultant. For example, if I'm preparing for a presentation and want guidance on how to deliver my slides more effectively, I can ask Gemini for professional advice. Something like, how can I make this slide more interesting for my audience? How should I present it?
You could add some visuals to make the slide more engaging. Maybe some impactful images or charts to illustrate the points you're making about fuel costs, emissions, and charging infrastructure. Also, consider using animations to bring the data to life. When presenting, try to tell a story with the slides rather than just reading the bullet points. Engage the audience with your voice and enthusiasm.
Then I can go back and forth with Gemini, refining my slides based on its feedback. And don't forget, if you set a specific role and rules for Gemini in system instructions, it can really improve the quality of the advice. The Stream Realtime section also has its own run settings. For most regular users, the one you'll probably use the most is Change Voice. The rest are mostly developer-focused, so we'll skip those for now. All right, let's move on to the next section, Generate Media. In Google AI Studio, the Create Media section is divided into 3 main parts: image generation, speech generation, and video generation. Let's start with image generation. Here, you'll find Google's latest Imagen 4 model. You can use it to create ad materials, illustrations, visual concepts, or even just for fun. And here you can choose an aspect ratio depending on your purpose. For example, let's say I'm making promo materials for a newly opened coffee shop. I want to highlight a professional image, so I'd like to generate a picture of a barista crafting an intricate latte art. With Imagen 4, the image quality is seriously impressive. Next, let's look at speech generation. This feature is more geared toward creators. You can use it to add narration to videos, turn an article into an audio file, or even produce a podcast. Here, you can choose between single-speaker audio or two-person dialogue, and you can also change the speaker's voice. It's pretty fun to experiment with, so I recommend giving it a try yourself. Now let's talk about video generation. Here, Google AI Studio uses the VEO model, which can create videos up to 8 seconds long. You can use it for ad materials, social media clips, concept animations, or simply for entertainment. But right now, AI Studio only offers the VEO2 model, not the newest VEO3. If you're interested in video generation, check out our previous video where we covered how to use Google's latest VEO3 in detail. All right, let's move on to the next part. Build apps. Even if you have zero coding experience, as long as you have an idea, you can use natural language to quickly build a working application. One of the biggest strengths of Google AI Studio is that it lets you seamlessly integrate all the Gemini features we talked about earlier, without any programming barriers. For example, let's say I want to create a recipe app where users can upload a photo of food and instantly get the recipe. Once I run prompt, AI Studio jumps to a coding-friendly interface where I can see the code being generated automatically. When it's ready, a preview window pops up. Here I upload a photo of a dish I had during my trip to Hong Kong, something I still can't stop thinking about. This is the photo taken at that time. The result is fantastic. Not only does it give me the recipe and step-by-step instructions, but it also identifies the dish name and other details. And let's take a look at the code. There's a file called Gemini Service, and in there, one line specifies the model, which means this app is calling the Gemini 2.5 Flash model. Everything from analyzing the food photo to generating the recipe was handled by Gemini 2.5 Flash. Of course, if you need, you can also specify which Gemini model to use when you're writing your initial prompt. One more really convenient thing about building an app in Google AI Studio is the one-click deploy to the cloud feature. This way, other people can use your app too. Just click Deploy to Cloud Run in the top right corner, then hit Deploy App. The first time you do this, you'll need to set up billing, because whenever someone uses your app, it will call the Gemini model through the API, which generates usage costs. But don't worry, Google gives you some free credits to start with, and even if you use them up, you'll only be charged if you upgrade to a paid cloud billing account. Once deployment is complete, you'll get an app URL. Anyone with this link can use your app. You'll also get an API key, which you can think of as a pass to access the Gemini model. Whenever someone uses your app, Google uses this API key to know it's your app making the call, and will bill you for it. That's why it's very important not to share your API key publicly. If someone else gets it and uses it to call the Gemini model, the charges will be on your account. Now, let's try the recipe app again. Okay, just like in the preview earlier, the results are about the same. Next, let's click the dashboard button in the top right corner to switch to that page. If you're developing your own application and want to call the Gemini model, this is where you can get your API key. You can also check your Gemini API usage and costs here. For example, since I just used the recipe app once, you can see the token usage and request count for the 2.5 Flash model. And because I still have free credits, the total cost is showing as 0. All right, that's the full intro of Google AI Studio. Now, even though AI Studio doesn't have the same user interface features as the Gemini web page, like deep research, collaborative canvas editing, it does give you the ability to customize and fine-tune the model, control its responses using system instructions, and even compare outputs side by side using compare mode to see how different models or instructions perform. Plus, there are extra features you won't find on the Gemini site, like real-time screen sharing, speech generation, and even the option to build an app and deploy it with just one click. Most importantly, for developers, AI Studio lets you generate API keys to call Gemini models directly and access SDK code so you can control exactly how Gemini behaves in your app. So, in short, learning how to use AI Studio is like unlocking the full potential of Gemini. Okay, that's it for today's video. If you have any questions about Google AI Studio, or if there's a specific part you'd like me to dive deeper into, feel free to leave a comment down below. If you found this video helpful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to miss our next video, don't forget to turn on the notification bell. That's all. See you next time. Bye!